Check, check. Looks like we're good to go. All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for coming. This is the New Business Tools Definitive Guide webinar. Just to let you know a bit of background, first, of course, thank you all for coming. But in terms of who we are, we're RSW US, and for those that don't know, we're a full-service outsourced business development group that helps agencies win new business. So we only work with agencies of all types and sizes, and we represent your company as part of your team. We're also there to develop new business positioning and prospecting plans, build the industry's cleanest and most customized lists, and get clients qualified meetings in front of decision makers. So ultimately, they're to move clients beyond those initial meetings and get them closer to close. So who am I? I'm Lee Mcknight, Jr. I'm the Director of Business Development at RSW US. Quick housekeeping, if you'd like to tweet during the webinar, and certainly please do, you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner of every slide there the hashtag Agency New Business. We also use RSW US. Our Twitter handle is at RSWUS. You'll see that in the bottom right-hand corner in the middle as well. And then my email is on every slide, Lee, L-E-E, at rswus.com. Certainly feel free offline, anytime to shoot me an email, if you're interested in any questions or interested in hearing how we operate. So we're going to start with some background, and very quickly before that, certainly do want to thank Brett Hodgins and Jessica Principato, the entire team at Mirren Business Development. All put a lot of work into the report, as did we certainly, and excited to have a co-sponsorship with them. Are planning on doing this annually, and we'll probably mention that again somewhere during the webinar, but in terms of their help, it's been invaluable. Quickly, Mirren is exclusively focused on new business strategy for marketing services agencies across all disciplines. They work closely with agency principals and new business leaders, who are in the trenches every day, if you will, in terms of new business at their agency. Mirren offers 3 services: a new business network and resource center, on-site new business training, and in the annual Mirren New Business Conference. And we have been a sponsor of that the last 4 years. That conference is typically in May every year, in the main one in New York City. But if you haven't been before, would certainly recommend that you think about attending. It's a fantastic place to network, but I guess even more importantly, a lot of great speakers that are there to help you, and workshops help better your new business program. You can reach Mirren at Mirren, mirren.org, mirren.org, and you'll see the information to email Brent there. So our initial goal, in terms of background for the survey, was to create an annual survey of the top new business tools that agencies use. Fairly straightforward there. We were working with Brent prior to this past year's conference, and thought, let's try to get something we can pull together that really agencies can use throughout the year. It's got some legs to it, and ideally, once we had decided on the topic, let's think about doing this annually, and that is our plan. You see here, you can download it, rswus.com, resources, /survey, /results. I will say, obviously, there's not a live link there you can click, but certainly if you go to our website, at the top right-hand corner, you'll see resources. You the tab will drop down there if you click on that with our survey results, so you can get there. And getting on our site, you'll see it's fairly easy to find, I should say. So I hope you could do that if you haven't downloaded it already. In terms of what we looked at, we have 300 agency respondents nationwide from RSW and Mirren databases that did take the survey. Also, and I will stop at the thank yous after this, but do want to thank some who we consider some great thought leaders out there in the new business space. Folks like Tim Williams and Michael Gass and Jay Baer, all of who helped us on the survey just through their support of tweets or blog posts surrounding the survey. Absolutely appreciate that, and hope that those folks we mentioned, I'm sure you're already aware of them, but they do a great job helping folks in agencies and across the marketing spectrum, really. So further background, the size of the agencies responding, fairly consistent with the distribution of agencies nationally. Small to mid-size, as you can see, fairly well represented here. Then in terms of titles, the majority of the respondents to the survey were either presidents, CEOs, COOs of the agency, or new business manager, director, VPs of agencies. And this is all found in the report, by the way. So we ultimately chose 12 categories. It's important to understand in terms of, there's a lot of thinking behind, well, how many categories, what are the most important categories, in terms of what we wanted agency, new business, employees, and principals to really focus on. And we certainly have gotten some feedback already. I laugh, all good, but I think, we had to balance a line when we looked at these categories. Initially, we had quite a few more, and quickly found that we were going to, in this first annual survey, really try to hone in on the ones that we thought probably were most used, and through our own experience of working with agencies, knew that were being used quite often. But in some areas, we combined some categories, and we've had that pointed out, and totally understand, where we maybe should separate those or keep them combined. But also, in terms of all of you who took the survey, we realized that it was a bit longer, maybe than our typical, for example, RSW US surveys. And I said my last thank you here a bit ago, but I guess I misspoke, because this is the last thank you for all of those that took it. Greatly appreciated, and we tried to keep it within a reasonable length of time, and we'll continue to do that. But here's our 12 categories. We'll go through each of them in turn at this stage, but you'll see social media platforms, CRM software, on the line SEO tools, email autoresponder services, inbound and project management and collaboration. So a pretty healthy mix. So the goal today, break down from these 12 categories the 4 key platforms that should be part of your agency arsenal, and then I'm going to explain why. So certainly keeping in mind, the fact that time is always a factor. Clients do come first. That budget certainly is always a factor. Ultimately, in terms of what kind of content you're able to generate, showing your expertise. So these, would be the 4 if we had to winnow down those that you truly need that we're recommending. 2 is just to show you what platforms your agency colleagues are finding most successful. We know all of you out there are at different, places in terms of new business. Some, quite frankly, don't have a new business program at all. For various reasons, maybe it's just always been referrals. We hope that this will maybe give you that, that impetus to start and have the tools that can surround that effort. Some are maybe restarting a program, and for various reasons, we know there's some agencies out there that stop and start and get it. Sometimes it just has to happen. It's not what you want to happen. It's certainly much tougher to jump back in and out, but if you are doing or if you're in that situation, we hope this helps to redefine or help define the program coming back into play. And then last, we know there's some of you out there right now that are listening that you have a pretty well-balanced team and program in place. So we're hoping that from here to the looking at here the second goal, showing you what platforms your agency colleagues are finding most successful, that you can either affirm or look at a platform that's working for you that you are using, or look at maybe we should be taking a look at some others that some of our colleagues are using and having good success. There's a 30-page glossary in the back of the report with live links that we really hope will be helpful in all these situations, or you're able to review at your leisure. So, New Business Tools, the definitive guide, 4 key primary platforms we recommend and why. Again, including what your fellow agencies are using, and then we'll talk about 5 key secondary platforms and why, and the fact that secondary is no indicator of quality here. Again, looking at budget and time and content generation considerations. So here's our 4, and we'll jump right in. So your perfect world. Very quickly though, let's look at a scenario here. In a perfect agency new business world, you would only need 3 tools in our estimation. It'd be an inbound marketing platform, CRM software, and then prospect contact or list building services. So why is it that we say, okay, these 3 in a perfect world? Well, first I mentioned inbound marketing services. Look, they are impressive. We look at things at the top 2 in our in our report in terms of the surveys that you all took, HubSpot and Marketo first and second. With these kind of tools, if you're not familiar, certainly worth checking them out. Today's not a new business primer, or we're not focusing on any one specific platform or tool. However, just quickly, in terms of inbound software, there's a lot there. I mean, centralized all-in-one tool sets, customer intelligence, reporting, inbound marketing automation, integrating with your CRM like a Salesforce, for example. Many of them do that now. You couple that inbound marketing platform with CRM software and then that list building service, truly you'd be in great shape. That is the ideal. However, let's have a quick, reality check. Number one, it's expensive. They're expensive. Inbound marketing software alone, and there's different platforms. It's not necessarily one size fits all from what I know of them. But on their own, certainly they can be expensive for a lot of agencies. Combined, with all three, definitely something that you've got to be ready, to take on as far as budget. And then a lot of agencies just don't have the time or the manpower or the content generation capabilities for all three of those. And quite frankly, a lot of agencies, they don't have any of these things in abundance. It's just not possible. The inbound marketing services alone, really you're required to blog almost every day, for example. And I don't mean to speak in generalities. As a caveat, some of these services are starting to provide some of that content generation also for you. So again, worth checking out. But in the scheme of things, what we're talking about right now, and those 4 tools that you really need, we're keeping in mind that, look, most of you just don't have the budget or the time. You're not able to really produce all that content on a weekly basis currently. And some 2 other things. Often agencies tend to overanalyze just new business generally and think that we have to wait until we have every single one of these pieces in place. Of course, you need a plan. You need those pieces in place. But moving into, secondly, what we see with agencies is, they get stalled with analysis paralysis on, well, what are we going to write about? Or we've got to have 500, prospects we're reaching out to just this month. Well, a couple things you're going to hear from me. The first one throughout this webinar. Well, first one, going back to agencies saying that we don't know what to write about. How can we be thought leaders? Well, you're doing excellent work every day for your clients within specific spaces, typically, and you're always within a specific space, typically, whatever project or AOR relationship you're working in or on. That's what you should write about. Write about those challenges. How did you help solve them? And you don't want to oversell or pound your chest, but you can subtly show how you get a particular sector, or how you help solve a particular challenge. You don't have to get into the nitty-gritty details, but these are things that other potential prospects or other potential, I should say, clients of yours, they want to know how you solved it, because they're probably going through the same thing. So, I think in terms of that, the second thing, and you will hear me mention this often, the mantra of this webinar is start small. You do not have to go after 500 prospects this month. You just can't do it typically. So let's think about, and I will pepper these throughout the webinar, how might you, start just a new business plan or program. So back to reality, let's crawl. Good segue there. Let's crawl before you walk. 4 platforms and tools you need. And I should throw out here, I may intersperse platform and tool intermittently, not meaning to understand in certain areas. One is they're definitely a specific tool, or one is a platform. If I do that, understand I recognize that, but it just may happen. So there's CRM services, list building services, social media platforms, and then email or auto responder services. The first 3 here, note if you have little to no content strategy, the first 3 are still effective. Again, you got to start somewhere, but those last 2 certainly are when you're, and I'll mention this again, but it's when you're going to need content produced or curated, which I'm sure you're familiar with or doing now. But that certainly is an option where you can combine that original thought leadership with something that already exists, saving you a lot of time, still showing some of your expertise. So let's start with CRM software. Tool number 1, again, CRM. Why? It's an effective new business program, or I should say for an effective new business program. You got to have a CRM. There really is no way to have a vibrant pipeline filling and effective inbound or outbound program, without one. It's easy when you start. any given program, but very quickly prospects are going to number in the hundreds. And you simply can't track, incorporate data, or follow up with prospects really without one. And as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, we know many agencies who stop and start, and they don't use a CRM. Okay, is it possible to do it? Technically, yes, but stopping and starting or not using CRM, ultimately, you probably really aren't doing or carrying on a really rich or consistent program. So let's put it that way. Some advantages to CRM, there's a lot of them, but they help by tracking email campaigns. The fact that many of them sit in the cloud, in terms of mobility and being able to access them from wherever you are. Monitoring the overall sales pipeline, probably the biggest advantage. But being able to connect via social media and tie it together, and then integrating all that customer data, all things that are extremely tough to do without a CRM. Let's look quickly, and we're going to shoot these out for every tool just so you can see, but we won't go in depth on the analysis. It's something that's in our report you can download, but just wanted to give you, as I mentioned earlier, a shot of what your fellow colleagues, agency, new business folks, and principals are using. So for CRM, it's Salesforce at 39%, fairly far ahead of everyone else with 58% effective rating, not bad. And you can see as we go down the line. And you'll note, at the bottom of, when we look at other mentions, invariably you're going to see with every category some that don't really fit in those scenarios. In terms of like a pure CRM, is something like Excel certainly is an example, which you'll see here in a moment too. But those were write-ins, and we asked for that, and are glad that they were written in because it's always interesting. Just so you know, there's some of that mixing. Only 37% of agencies using a CRM believe their system is effective. Another stat here that's not on your screen, but they aren't really widely used, period. I mean, only 45% of agencies responding say they're using one at all. So then of those, with only 37% believing the whole system is effective, not a great track record. I mean, why are they saying they're not effective? Difficult to keep updated. They only use it as a database, too complex or expensive. Certainly, we've heard all those things before. The real reason they aren't using them to the fullest, 39% of agency executives, saying that they use their CRM once a month or less. Not good, really. We appreciate the candor. It was honestly, it really was good to see the fact that you can admit, look, we had this, but we're just not using it. We often see them collecting dust. You paid for it. Try to get someone, either yourself or internally, that can take a bit of time to learn some of the ins and outs. It doesn't mean you have to know every single piece of it. I agree. Some of them can be overly complex, to be sure. And some agencies have told us, and we understand that not a lot of these are necessarily used to help agencies. They're used to more sell widgets in terms of that type of sales. That's true, and so that's why here, for example, RSW. We use Goldmine, but that's mainly because we've been able to customize it in many ways. Always on the lookout to look at what else is out there, but we use it specifically in terms of what we do for our agency clients. And Excel, not a CRM. Yes, there's going to be one of you, out there, I'm sure, that would say, well, I use Excel and we seem to be doing fine. So, yeah, exception to every rule, of course, but Excel is there, to be your database. It's not a CRM ultimately, and it's going to be so much more work if that's what you're going to try to work off of. I mean, again, Excel spreadsheet, better than nothing, but a good CRM can be that critical time saver that you need. So let's look at prospect, contact, and list building services. Why list building services? Because it's the backbone of any program. A targeted, clean list. Every effort is only as good as the list that you're using or that you've created. And the majority of agencies, they just don't have time to do it. You can have an argument. We've heard it before. That a strong inbound program. You don't necessarily need to build a lot of lists for outbound, but we disagree. We feel that to have a truly vibrant and consistent program, you need both an inbound and an outbound strategy. Plus the fact there's a lot of junk that comes in through that inbound strategy that you have to then parse and see what's best fit, and then you still have to reach out and sell them. So by having a good outbound program, you're focusing on those best fit prospects right out of the gate. In theory, anyone on your list is a good client for you. Now, of course, you have to qualify them. That there's always, again, exceptions there too, we understand. But advantages here, I mean, time is a huge one. Just the time it takes to build a list. I mean, I have nothing but respect for our folks here on the list building team. We do, if you don't know, we provide lists as part of our overall service for our agency clients. You know, I'm not particularly wired to do that, and I'm more on the sales side, but what they do is invaluable. And it takes a lot of time to, you know, find the right fit in terms of the parameters. And then that we work, and we do work with our clients to find those and set those parameters, but then scrubbing, cleaning, and making sure that they're lists that are ready to use for our sales folks. It's a tough job, and they do good work. But ultimately, you know, there's the research part of it in terms of the research that goes into sometimes the lists themselves, or with some of these companies that you actually receive against some of these companies, and then just the quality and quantity of leads, something that agencies just have a really tough time doing on their own. You look at what your colleagues are using. The list fairly far ahead at 49%. You know, 45% effectiveness rating there, and then Jigsaw a bit behind, but and then Access Confidential kind of leading the pack. Do want to thank whoever put RSW there as a write-in. I will say we did not include ourselves. Neither did Mirren. You know, in any of these categories, wanting to remain impartial. But thank you for the shout out, you know, nonetheless. 43% of agencies surveyed use a list service. You know, slightly surprising given how difficult it can be, you know, to build and clean and maintain these lists internally. But, you know, although we suspect it's not that the other 57% are doing it themselves. They're just not using lists at all. Look, again, not a new business primer, but if you can't use a list service, start small. 20 to 40 prospects a month if you want to try to do it internally. And, you know, really, I'd start with 20. You know, build the parameters first, as we mentioned before: geography, revenue, you know, verticals, titles. Again, what you want is when you're, and the exercise itself can be extremely helpful of doing this, thinking about who's going to be your best fit client. But when you look at that first list you've created, again, ideally, anyone on that list is an ideal client for you. I'm trying to throw ideal out twice in one sentence there, excuse me. But, you know, assign 20 prospects a month to a different person in the agency so that over the course of a month, they're building and cleaning those 20. That's entirely doable. I mean, really, it truly is, especially to start. And then you have that person the next month that's able to actually reach out to those folks, you know, some combination of that. Again, start small. So let's look at social media platforms. Elvis looking a bit indignant there. His friend in the back has discovered teeth whitener. Pretty good. Didn't know it was going to be a comedy show, did you? Why social media platforms? You know, a lot of this is going to be self-evident, I realize. So let's not, you know, beat the horse here. But social's not going anywhere. You know, if you don't use it, it's at your peril. You know, marketers are getting younger. We heard an NBD tell us here recently. A prospect specifically told her, I don't do voicemail. And I'll get into that story a little bit more actually here in a moment. But, you know, some advantages. I want to thank Michael Gass right now. I mean, used verbatim these 3 advantages from one of his blog posts. And if you don't know Michael, he helps consult with agencies specifically on how to use social media for new business, and has been doing it now for a little while. And it typically gets very high marks out there from agencies. So would definitely have you Google and check out his Fuel Lines blog, or you can see his name there if you're not familiar with him. Does a nice job. So thanks again to Michael for these. But what he says: social media teaches agencies to promote themselves the way they should have been doing new business all along. And that is to lead with benefits instead of agency capabilities, you know, and credentials. Agencies need a differentiated and appealing position, you know, to a particular target audience. 85% of CMOs found their vendors, you know, not the other way around, according to a CMO study that Michael quotes from a few years ago. And then last, by enlarging the agency's online footprint so it can be found by their best prospective clients that match up with the core strengths of the agency. And, you know, Michael wants you to go big, you know, with an agency blog, you know, a content strategy around it, and then social to be the delivery arm for that. And he's 100% right. But again, you got to start small, you know, especially with social. That's why I've listed it here rather than as one of the secondary tools coming up. It can be a huge help to you. And we'll go into that story I mentioned. But first, quickly, 87% of agency surveys did use the social media platforms, I should say. So, you know, a healthy number, but here only 18% rated social media as being effective. Is frustrating. So, God, begs the question right off the bat, then why are so many of you using it if the great majority of you don't find it effective? First of all, we understand probably why, a lot of reasons, but like anything else, in new business or otherwise, social takes time to work, and a lot of agencies, don't have the patience. They don't see the payoff as quickly as they want, or they just think it's not effective, or quite frankly, there's just a lot, as a lot of platforms out there. But again, too many agencies still don't believe in it as a tool, period, for new business. And what you've got to do is treat social the same way you treat your overall prospecting, with consistency and follow through. And I mentioned that story. I'll give you one example, and a quick one. A new business director who was reaching out to an individual at Axe, the body spray, so skewing young there, and had actually I believe 2 calls actually. Both of limited duration, but she was getting in there. But on that second call, he had said, very, very nice about it, but said, look, I don't do voicemail. And I really don't, unless I have to, I really don't do a lot of email either. He pretty much does live on his phone. And so we set up a Twitter feed for the new business director in the agency's name and with her first name, leading the handle. To try and follow this guy, just follow him, not to stalk him. And Twitter is a good tool for doing just that. That is following, seeing what this individual might be doing, or a business that you can use to break through to show them, hey, we're doing some homework here, and there's a reason we're reaching out to you. Certainly based on our expertise as well. But anyway, I believe within a month of starting that feed, he reached out to her directly with a direct Twitter message and said, look, it's time. Let's get this meeting set up and let's do this. So, it's interesting. Again, just one channel, and you need to use everyone out there, including direct mail, including, of course, email, phone calling, but social's part of that too. In concert with everything else, that's a strong program. Again, start small. Start with something like LinkedIn, which I would imagine, and I bet you're all on now. It has its limitations in terms of interaction, for example. Although, interacting with your prospects potentially without maybe being too intrusive. Having said that, they've made a lot of changes here in the past couple of years, as I'm sure you're all aware of, to help that interaction perhaps be a little bit easier and show your thought leadership to folks without, again, stalking them. But Twitter's another great one, and just start small. Just take a list of 20 of your prospects. Just start following them on Twitter and say, I'm going to do 2 things on Twitter a day. I'm going to retweet some good content. I'm going to retweet one of my prospects. Just start there. But again, it's going to be helpful to you. The last of our key tools here is the email or autoresponder service. Why? Well, in short, time and reach. It's again fairly self-evident here. I mean, while many people do it poorly, and many agencies, quite frankly, just do it poorly, it's still an entirely viable channel, again, in concert with all the others. But if you tried to do this internally yourself and sending out blasts and keeping in, with regulations and the content that goes with it as well, tough for agencies to do. Because, again, I mentioned this earlier, but we're starting now to tread the waters where you'll need to start creating content or curating, without ongoing, blogging. And we'll get into that here in a second too, but let's look at some quick advantages. The cost is actually pretty low for a lot of these list building services. Some of them, in fact, if you keep under a certain amount of, I'm about to sneeze there, a certain amount of prospects, it can remain free for quite some time. Also, just the fact that this list management help. As I said earlier, keeping in with regulations in the CAN-SPAM Act, they do all that for you. You don't have to worry about doing your own blasts and perhaps breaking one of those rules and getting yourself in some kind of trouble. But then also just the statistics, huge there, just in terms of the clicks and opens and being able to, now you have your warm prospects right there. So in terms of what you're using, MailChimp and Constant Contact neck and neck, but MailChimp wins out. Effective ratings are pretty high across the board, oddly, with the exception of Emma and Vertical Response. Didn't go into a lot of reasons why there, but we'll get into a few. But you'll see that they're out there and agencies are using them. 55% saying they're effective, primarily because easy to use, customizable, and easy to track. All things that we've heard before. Maybe not a big surprise. They are fairly simple to use for the most part. So 15%, that's about it, that don't find their platforms effective. They say it's because they don't put the time into it and make it work. Again, appreciate the candor, and there's not much more to be said there. If you've got it and you're paying for it, especially as automated and as easy as these can become. I will say this. The thing that's good about email autoresponder services, it's going to be a good lead-in to perhaps one-day blogging, because it's and we might get into a little bit of this later, but you can look at once a month sending out some kind of a newsletter, and if you curate content, industry specific, within the folks you're going after, the prospects you're going after, and then you can add some of your own thought leadership with just a paragraph or two. You don't want to make these things too long, but it's a good way to start getting into the knack of writing, and knowing that you're not having to necessarily blog every day about something and thinking, God, what am I going to blog about tomorrow? So it's a good place to start, to be sure. So just to recap, the 4 key tools and why. You had CRM services, list building services, social media platforms, the email and autoresponder services. Now, underlying all these, your agency positioning and expertise in the space. I love that picture. But, in all seriousness, it is something that you've got to think about. If you get nothing else away from this webinar today, ideally these tools are helpful, and the report can help you as a reference and guide throughout the rest of the year. But you really got to think about, again, taking baby steps and starting small. There's that mantra. But showing these prospects of yours, look, that you get it, that you are expert in the space. You're helping solve challenges every day, and figuring out a way to do that. And each one of you is certainly going to be different, but you don't have to be the next, I mentioned earlier, you don't have to be the next Jay Bear, or Michael Gass, in terms of how much content they put out there right now. Start small, but stick to a schedule. Ultimately, it's going to help you. We've seen it. We've seen it happen not only for our clients, but for ourselves. So let's look at 5 key secondary platforms. The tools that, quite frankly, we're going to look at and call secondary because they're, and I said this earlier, but not because of quality, but because they're largely dependent on your content output and budget size. So if you've been able to, I won't say master necessarily, because I don't think you have to master the first 4 key tools we talked about, but if you're feeling comfortable and you're starting slowly to write content and you're sticking to a schedule and starting small, these are the next 5 tools that you should consider adding, to your arsenal, if you will. Again, baby steps, but we're looking at SEO tools, research services, social media monitoring, marketing webinar platforms, and then survey software. So let's look at those SEO tools. Love that picture. What are your colleagues using? Google Analytics at 42%, well ahead of the pack. I should say here, I mentioned it earlier, so again, don't want to belabor it. This is one of those categories where we definitely combined 2 categories. Right or wrong, I guess technically it's not right if you drill down to it, but it's understandable. We if you look at it, really, we have 2 things going on here. We have those tools that can help optimize your site, for example, up front. And then the SEO analytics type of tools, which you see that when agencies are listing Google Analytics there, that are going to analyze and be able to help you use that data to break through to your prospects. So they are mixed a bit here. So apologies there, but just keeping in mind, really SEO analytics tools. Next year we'll break this out. I think it's ideal to do that, but just so you know. So only 17% of agencies on the right side there say they manage their SEO analytics daily. 36% of those same executives say they do something in the social space every day. Not a big shock, honestly. It takes time. It's complicated as far as SEO goes. Here's a good quote from Moz.com, their beginner's guide to SEO. SEO isn't just about getting the technical details of search engine friendly web development correct. It's also about marketing. So this is perhaps the most important concept to grasp about the functionality of search engines. You can build a perfect website, but its content can remain invisible to search engines unless you promote it. Add to that the fact that, looking at a little history, 1990s we had in terms of SEO, the meta keyword tags, and keyword stuffing, and then 2004 and on, the link bombing with an anchor text, and then buying tons of links from automated blog comment, those spam injectors, which, by the way, I think would be a great name for a band, spam injector. But and we still get tons of that spam injector junk on our blog all the time. But and then today, looking at things like author rank and things like Google Plus, and Google's trying to have drive folks to. What you get out of that is it changes a constant when it comes to search. Again, the majority of agencies, unless they're well versed and don't, and unless they're doing it for clients as part of a service and they really get it, you just don't have time for the constant change. Couple that with how difficult it can be to write that content, that's contributing to the strong SEO. Unfortunately, you got an ongoing catch-22, for agencies. So, again, start small. First, set a goal to get your site optimized, and that can get expensive, yes, but there also may be tweaks that perhaps you can do yourself. There's a lot out there these days. I know some of it we've done ourselves, and we've had some certain clients on the SEO side that have actually helped us as well. But figure out a way to do that within budget, and quite frankly, that's something that even to spend a bit is money well spent. To have people be able to find you increasingly better and in better ways. But create one new case study a month, just one, and assign that to someone. Commit to just one post a month in terms of blogging. That's doable, and it's something where keep it about your industry. Keep it about how you may have helped solve the challenge. You don't want to get ultra specific, and I'm sure you're not going to be able to name names. Maybe you might, but start somewhere, and use a free tool like Google Analytics at the end, at least once a week. You don't have to check that every day. I mean, it's ideal, and there's certainly 3 or 4 things like trackbacks, people that might have included your site in a link. A couple of things that may help you that really within 15-20 minutes, or even less, you can see. But I think to give it a dive once a week to be sure. And then looking at research services next in line. Here's what your colleagues are looking at. Hoover, and it's a tight race here, really across the board for the most part. But Hoover's at 17%, tied with Forrester at 17%, Mintel and Iconoculture. And you can see in the other mentions, there's a lot of information out there on the research side, which is good. It's great to have these options, certainly. The majority of agencies in our survey say they use research services, 60%. 41% of those that use research services deem them effective at helping them, bolster their new business development efforts. That's good to see. A few reasons they say they use research services that agencies said they did. In our survey report, clients and prospects love it. Love the research. How can you pitch someone if you don't know their business? Great quote there. Another one, it's like going to battle and not reading the decoded message from the enemy. All good quotes, and yeah, absolutely makes sense. So a few reasons agency executives don't subscribe to specific services. They say the data isn't granular enough, that there's limited information available on regional prospects, which is the big one for a lot of clients, and then that the value doesn't really match the cost. So understand all three. I will say, to make a distinction, research for prospecting versus pitching. Certainly you could say, well, they're synonymous. I mean, it's the same thing all around. But the research that goes into who your ideal prospect is up front, and then the timely and immediate research that you'll use to break through to a prospect that you'll need right away, right before that call or that email or that conversation, and then a much deeper dive for the actual pitch itself. So my point really, though, is because we can dabble in semantics here, but we've seen agencies go into research paralysis in the prospecting phase specifically. You can't and you don't need to spend an hour, reaching before, and you may laugh and say, good Lord, who does that? But we've heard, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but we've heard some of these new business directors that have to have all their ducks in a row and just are spending time at night or on the side of their desk researching all these folks copiously. Research is important, especially in that pitch, but up front when you're prospecting, quick hit on the Twitter feed, Google News feed, their website. Just see if there's anything there. If not, use something industry specific as a general challenge. You don't want to pretend you know their specific challenge because you'll just upset them. But you can have something quickly in hand. There's just so many tools and free tools out there, these days. So social media monitoring, easier said than done, right? It's like SEO in a way. Social media can certainly become a sprawling beast with all the platforms that are out there. In terms of monitoring and those tools, Hootsuite is at the top of the pack there with 37%, a 43% effective rate, and then TweetDeck, coming down the line, and Clout, and then I'm down. I realize, once you get in some of these, several of these do different things, and there's a thread through all of them in terms of being able to monitor, your activity, but some of them provide much more than that, quite frankly. I mean, Hootsuite's one I know that has a free version and a pro version, so something worth checking out. I know I've heard good things about several of these. When asked to rate the most effective of the bunch, agencies did rate Hootsuite most effective, as you saw. They said it's easy to use, it's user-friendly, it allows more social platforms, that you're able to monitor from. And then, why agencies don't like the products offered in the space. There's limitations on social media outlets. It's too time-consuming. It can't tie to ROI very well. They're just not using it very effectively. And then it's hard to find, actionable insights just overall. It's something where, look, we didn't put it in the first 4 of the tools, but as a next step, if you will, you've got to be able to monitor what you're doing. SEO is another example. So using something like TweetDeck or Hootsuite, it actually helps you. It's not time consuming if you know how to use it, and it's just practice a bit. But it helps you once you get into the numbers. It's like prospecting itself. Once you start getting hundreds and hundreds of Twitter followers, for example, to be able to use and divide them by lists, and all this stuff is out there for you to, free for you to figure out, or someone like I mentioned earlier with Michael Gass, and being able to help you understand. Ultimately, it's going to help you. It's going to help your current clients. It's going to keep you on top of things, and potentially your prospects as well. Marketing and webinar platforms. You look at, what were the go-tos. Primary GoToWebinar at 35%. WebEx there fairly quickly behind them. And then you can see the others. Not as many options here, but I think it's one of those things that quite a few agencies certainly use. Most generally satisfied, 56%, stating as such, saying it makes it easy to connect with others. Have a lot of out-of-town clients they use it for, and allows them to actually control the presentation. Only 12% say meeting platforms you're using are not effective. The few issues noted relate to technical problems. Can be tough, specifically trouble getting users logged in. Again, the fact that they just don't use it enough. Webinars can be tough until you've established your thought leadership. Prospects are incredibly busy. Without a strong position and a following from them, it's tough to get them in the seats. Now, again, chicken and an egg here problem, right? You got to start somewhere. But I think, again, that's why we put this secondarily. In terms of some folks are using these type of platforms, again, for more communication purposes with current clients or meetings. So that's what I'm speaking specifically to here, though, is if you're doing a webinar like this one. It can definitely be valuable. Again, if you focus it on your prospects and their particular challenges or industry-specific challenges versus just pounding your chest, can be helpful. So survey software will indeed change your life. What we have there, nearly 80% those using survey software are using SurveyMonkey and Zoomerang by a very wide margin there, interestingly. So, and I think that's certainly the one you hear about most these days, but not the only one. And survey software is something interesting. It's similar to email marketing, and I'll get to why. But quickly, those that felt like it was not effective, 25% said no bandwidth to use it, really no flexibility, and then they mentioned a lack of expertise. Again, it's just about taking the time to use the tools. Only 40% say it was effective. It's great at helping get at original insights. You can use it for clients. Prospects love to hear about themselves. Certainly, it's inexpensive, and I say across the board, most of them are. And it's pretty straightforward in terms of how to use it. And I think, again, you have some parallels between email marketing autoresponder software as well. And so I brought this up earlier with, as I said, with that email marketing, but something to consider with surveys even more so. It's a project of defined duration, versus blogging, again, that you have to do every day. We're not saying you have to do it every day, but, ideally, keeping it consistent certainly is what you want. But survey software or creating a survey is excellent because, it's defined duration. You get that survey, create those questions and spend some time crafting them. But then push it out there, and then you can have that be part of your content or your social engine, for example, and helping that thought leadership show through. But it's excellent insights for your own content, also to better understand just the challenges of your prospects out there. It's going to help you in a huge way. And that's how RSW. That's how we started. We didn't start by blogging every day. It came a little bit later, and the social that we do and have been doing now. But to be able to create a survey like that, and again, you want to be careful because there's a lot of surveys floating around out there. But if you can make it so you do these ongoing, you'll get some good traction. It's a great way to get your name out there, and something that is fairly, I won't say easy to do necessarily, because you really got to craft those questions well, but something that can truly help kickstart your effort. And that's why we, quite frankly, had debated putting this maybe as one of the key primary tools up front. But again, I think it's one of those, walk before, or I should say, crawl before you walk kind of situations. It's something to definitely consider. So that's it. I want to thank you, and really hope that the guide itself, hope you certainly are able to download that free. You see at rswus.com. Go to our resources tab, and certainly hope the webinar itself here today has given you at least some better direction, or help you see where you might be able to better your programs. But again, I know it was taking some time out of your day. Great to see that we had everyone stay on the entire time. I know it took up some valuable time, so appreciate it. Certainly email me at lee@rswus.com if you have any questions about the survey, any issues in downloading, or just want to talk about how we might be able to help you. Would love to do that, and thank you, everybody.